Hey everyone, welcome to another page in the Desert Plant Diary. I'm Carl. In this video I share with you some of the crassulas that I purchased and received about 2 or 3 days ago. I did try to make a potting video. Unfortunately there was some amount of air traffic which made me quite inaudible in that video. I could barely understand myself. So first up here we have Crassula perforata variegata. Now I do like a lot of the cacti and succulents, but prefer most of the ones which have color. So this one is tricolor and makes it one of my favorites for sure. Let me share some of the tips I did share in the potting up video which I couldn't upload. So the first thing I want to talk about is the medium that I grow these plants in. So I use a medium of 50% sharp sand and 50% compost, and the reason why I do that is the compost provides for good nutrition and the sharp sand provides a good drainage, which is an absolute must while growing cacti and succulents. As you can see, the soil is very dry. The reason being I just potted these up about 2 or 3 days ago, and if I water it now it could lead to some amount of root rot. Though these plants have roots, there could be some kind of damage in transit, or perhaps when I potted it the roots could have broken. So I don't want to take a chance of encouraging root rot, so I'm going to wait for about a week, which is a good rule of thumb, and then water it. While dealing with cacti and succulent cuttings as well, it's always a good idea to not water the cuttings in particular, because there are no roots for the water to be absorbed through. So what you could do when you have cuttings is to first take a cutting and let it callus over for about a week. And as you can see in this cutting over here, roots have begun to form. Now typically I would not let roots form before I pot it in soil. That is because if I plant this now, some of the roots could break off and that could encourage root rot again. So there's that risk. Though it's not a big problem if you wait for about a week before you start to moisten the soil, not necessarily water it. So what you could do is to take a cutting, let it callus over in an area where you do not get direct sunlight. Let it callus over for a week, then stick it in soil. And maybe you could mist it after you stick it in soil for about a week or two, and try to tug very gently at the cutting to see if there's some amount of resistance. If there is some amount of resistance, you will know that roots have begun to form, and you could perhaps start to water it very sparingly, maybe a tablespoon or 2 of water near, not necessarily at the place where it's anchored to the soil. And after about a month or 2, the root system could possibly be quite established, and you could water it like a regular established plant. Well, next up we have what I'm guessing is a Crassula baby's necklace, and in transit this thing has broken off as well. So I haven't quite removed the bottom 2 leaves, which ideally should be done, because this thing does look very delicate. I'm frightened that I'm quite rough with cuttings, so I'm going to wait, just let this sit over here and let it ride. I'm sure roots will form and get into the soil. I will tilt it over so if there's any moisture that's trapped, it will evaporate off. So what I will do is water at this corner, and so it will get kind of dampen the soil over here, and moisture will just reach this part. It will get a little moist and not necessarily wet. What you should be doing ideally when you have these cuttings is, here's another example, this broken transit too. So what you might want to do is to break the bottom 2 leaves off, remove a few more, which should be ideal in this case as well, and then anchor the cutting in the soil. The reason why I've left these 2 leaves is because I've noticed with succulent cuttings, the cutting does try and take energy off some of the bottom leaves while it pushes roots or tries to encourage root growth. So I am going to stick this over here, and the reason why I'm doing that away from the rooted cutting over here is because I'm going to water this plant over here, the outer circumference over here. This part of it is going to get damp, but over here it's going to be just moist. A good thing to do when you have cuttings is to just moisten the soil, because this encourages the new roots to go out and search for water. If you have a pot that's filled with cuttings, it's good to sit the bottom part in a saucer and water the saucer and let the pot suck up all of that water to maybe half of the distance. That way the cutting will form roots, and the roots are encouraged to go searching for that water source. Next up we have this plant. I also want to share with you that this was just a cutting with 2 leaves, as you can see. And all of this new growth you see over here to become an established plant is off just that cutting with 2 leaves. So good job by the person who propagated this. So next up we have this. It's very fuzzy textured, not sure of the name. Beautiful one nonetheless. So I've let it lean over because I'm guessing this has some kind of pendulous growth habits. Next up we have this. I was told by the seller that this is new to India. Not sure of the name of this crassula. It does remind me a bit of the Excelis though, which is this guy over here. However, the morphology is slightly different in terms of the pattern being almost the same. But this has broader leaves and that's quite narrow. And finally we have the crassula Tom's Thumb. Very, very tiny. Let me use my thumb since it's called Tom's Thumb for comparison. Very, very tiny, beautiful guy, beautiful coloration as well. So that's all of the plants that I have to share with you guys. I hope you've gotten some information you could use. I'm no expert when it comes to cacti or succulents. This is just 2 or 3 years of experience. So I hope this encourages you guys to go out in your garden, and if you are a gardener, continue gardening or start a collection perhaps. Here's me wishing you guys a lot of strength and inspiration to go out in your garden, get your plant mojo on and start something new today. All the way from the garden city of India, here's me wishing you guys a fantastic day. Cheers.